Ambassador Zephyrian's crystalline form pulsed with agitation as he reviewed the latest reports from the Galactic Environmental Assessment Bureau. His species, the Quelari, had been cataloging Deathworlds for over 3 millennia, and their classification system was considered the gold standard across 47 star systems. Today, that system was failing spectacularly. Director Voss. He called to his assistant, a serpentine Nitherian whose scales shifted color with emotion. These readings from Sol 3 cannot be correct. Director Voss slithered closer, his scales flickering between confusion yellow and concern orange. Sir, we verified the data 17 times. The automated probes, long-range scans, quantum sensors, and even the infiltration biologicals all confirm these readings. The numbers are accurate, but they're... He paused, searching for words. They're impossible. Zephyrian's crystal structure darkened, a sign of deep thought among his kind. The planet designated Sol 3, or Earth as its dominant species called it, defied every metric they used for planetary classification. It wasn't just dangerous. It was a systematic attempt by physics itself to eliminate life. According to our comprehensive analysis, Voss continued, consulting his bioluminescent display pad with trembling appendages, the planet experiences regular seismic activity that would qualify it as Class 7 unstable. The atmospheric pressure variations during weather systems reach Class 6 volatile levels. Solar radiation exposure puts it at Class V hazardous. The temperature differentials across the surface span a range that would shatter most known biological matrices. And the biodiversity threat assessment? Zephyrian prompted, though he already dreaded the answer. Class 9 nightmare, sir. Everything on that planet seems specifically engineered to kill everything else. We've cataloged microscopic organisms that dissolve flesh on contact, plants that produce neurotoxins lethal to most known life forms, predators with bite forces exceeding our military-grade construction materials, atmospheric events that generate electrical discharges powerful enough to vaporize starship hulls. Zephyrian's form went completely transparent, the Quelari equivalent of a human's jaw dropping. And yet the dominant species not only survives, but thrives. Voss finished, his voice filled with scientific bewilderment. They've populated the entire planetary surface, including regions our computers flagged as certain death zones. They swim in waters acidic enough to dissolve most species' exoskeletons. They consume biological compounds that would put a Gordanian battle warlord in a coma. They voluntarily expose themselves to their system's primary star for recreational purposes. The ambassador moved to the viewport of their research station, gazing down at the blue-green world that shouldn't be able to support any life, let alone intelligent civilization. Storm systems raged across its surface like cosmic weapons. Volcanic activity painted entire continents with molten rock, and yet, lights. Millions of lights indicating vast settlements, thriving cities, bustling civilization. Have we attempted contact? Zephyrian asked. Negative, sir. The Prime Directive forbids contact with pre-FTL species. But, Voss paused, his scales shifting to embarrassed purple. There's been a development. Continue. They've been watching us, sir. Zephyrian's form flickered rapidly, the crystal equivalent of a double-take. Impossible. Our stealth technology is perfect against every known sensor array in the galaxy, yes, sir. But 3 days ago, they started pointing primitive optical telescopes and radio detection arrays directly at our position. Their global communication networks are buzzing with references to unusual stellar phenomena and possible extraterrestrial observation. Voss activated a holographic display showing human settlements across Earth's surface. Lights blinked on observatories, space centers, and research facilities as humans aimed their crude, but surprisingly effective instruments toward their hidden observers. They detected us with Stone Age technology? Zephyrian whispered. It gets more concerning, sir. We intercepted their transmissions. They're not panicking. They're excited. Some groups are transmitting mathematical sequences and basic pictographs in our direction. They want to communicate with us. A pre-FTL species from a Class 9 Deathworld is attempting first contact? Sir, Voss said quietly, I don't think it's a Class 9 world. I think we need to create an entirely new classification. Zephyrian's crystalline form began to pulse with what could only be described as existential anxiety. In 3,000 years of cataloging Deathworlds and their inhabitants, he had never encountered anything like this. Species from Class V worlds were typically barely sentient, too focused on survival to develop complex thought. Class 7 species were usually primitive cave dwellers, desperately hiding from their planet's attempts to kill them. Class 9 worlds were considered uninhabitable by definition. No intelligent life could possibly evolve under such conditions. Yet here was a species from what could only be classified as a Class 11 world, a classification that didn't exist because the galactic consensus was that no life could survive on such a planet, not only thriving, but actively seeking contact with advanced alien civilizations. They weren't hiding from their death world. They were mastering it. "Sir," Voss said, his scales now a worried shade of blue, "what do we do? Our protocols have no guidance for this scenario." Ambassador Zephyrian continued staring at Earth, watching storm systems that could devastate entire star systems swirl across its surface like weather patterns on a garden world. Somewhere down there, billions of humans were going about their daily lives, building cities in earthquake zones, swimming in waters that would kill most galactic species, breathing an atmosphere that was technically a corrosive gas mixture, completely oblivious to the cosmic impossibility of their existence. "We're going to need a completely new classification system," he said finally, his voice filled with awe and apprehension. "And then, we're going to have to decide whether making contact with a species that calls hell itself home is the greatest opportunity in galactic history, or the most dangerous mistake we could possibly make." Dr. Elena Rodriguez was having the best day of her career, which was saying something for someone who had spent 15 years studying extremophile bacteria in some of Earth's most hostile environments. At -42 Celsius, with winds howling across the Antarctic ice sheet at over 80 kilometers per hour, most galactic species would have been frozen solid within minutes. Elena was making breakthrough discoveries. "Marcus, are you analyzing these metabolic readings?" She called to her research partner across their Antarctic research station. Outside, the wind screamed with enough force to strip flesh from bone, carrying ice particles like microscopic bullets through air so thin it would suffocate most oxygen-breathing species. Dr. Marcus Thompson looked up from his microscope, steam rising from his coffee in the relative warmth of their heated lab. "The ice core samples from the subglacial lake are extraordinary. These organisms shouldn't exist. Not just existing. Thriving," Elena said, her voice filled with scientific wonder. "The bacteria we extracted aren't just surviving in conditions that would qualify as a weapon-grade environment on most worlds. They're reproducing faster than anything we've cataloged. And Marcus, the metabolic processes they're using, they're converting toxic minerals into energy sources. This is impossible biochemistry." Meanwhile, 12,000 kilometers away in the crushing depths of the Japan Trench, marine biologist Dr. Yuki Tanaka was witnessing evolution that defied galactic understanding of life itself. 2 kilometers down, where pressure exceeded 200 atmospheres and water temperatures fluctuated between near freezing and superheated, his remote-operated vehicle had discovered an entire ecosystem. "Control, are you recording this data?" His voice crackled through the communication array to the research vessel above. "These organisms are living in water that's simultaneously corrosive, radioactive, and under pressure that should compress any known biological structure into paste. We're recording, Yuki, but our instruments keep flagging the readings as sensor errors," came the reply. "Those life forms are thriving in conditions that would instantly kill anything in our biological databases. And yet here they are," Yuki murmured, watching creatures that resembled nothing in galactic biological records move gracefully around volcanic vents, feeding directly on sulfur compounds and heavy metals that would be classified as universal toxins. Neither scientist knew it, but similar impossible discoveries were being made simultaneously around the globe. In the lightless caves of Mexico, researchers found ecosystems that had been completely isolated from solar energy for millions of years, yet supported complex food webs. In the radioactive exclusion zones around Chernobyl, life forms weren't just surviving the radiation, They were using it as a primary energy source, actually growing stronger in areas that would kill most galactic species in seconds. In the Atacama Desert, organisms extracted moisture from air with humidity levels so low they would desiccate most known biology. What none of them realized was that their planet was being observed by beings who had spent millennia cataloging worlds based on their hostility to life, and Earth was systematically destroying their understanding of what life could accomplish. High above, Ambassador Zephyrian reviewed the latest compilation of observational data with growing amazement and deep concern. His crystalline form pulsed with patterns that indicated severe cognitive dissonance. Director Voss, explain to me again how a species evolves on a planet where simply traveling from sea level to moderate elevation can cause fatal physiological collapse? Voss's scales had been locked on confused yellow for 3 days straight. Sir, they didn't just adapt to the altitude changes and atmospheric pressure variations. They've weaponized them. They have recreational activities called mountain climbing and skydiving that deliberately expose them to rapid decompression and oxygen deprivation. They seem to enjoy the sensation of nearly dying. And their response to thermal extremes? They've established permanent settlements in every temperature zone on the planet, sir. From regions where atmospheric gases freeze solid to areas where water vaporizes on contact with air. They've built thriving cities in both extremes. And Voss paused, his scales flickering with scientific disbelief. They have something called vacation destinations specifically in the most environmentally hostile regions. They travel to these death zones voluntarily, for pleasure. Zephyrian accessed the observational data directly, his crystalline matrix processing information at quantum computational speeds. What he discovered defied everything the galaxy understood about biological adaptation and survival instincts. Humans swimming with apex predators that could dismember them in seconds, for entertainment. Humans consuming ethanol in quantities that would induce coma or death in most spacefaring species, and calling it social drinking. Humans deliberately exposing themselves to solar radiation levels that would blind a Quelari permanently and give a Nitherian fatal radiation poisoning, then calling it getting a tan. Sir, Voss said hesitantly, there's something else. We've been monitoring their global information networks, and we found something that challenges our understanding of survival instincts. More challenging than everything else we've observed? They have entire industries dedicated to entertainment based on surviving impossible scenarios. They create fictional narratives called action movies and survival shows where the primary appeal is watching their own species navigate deadly situations. They voluntarily place themselves in mortal danger for recreational viewing. Zephyrian's form went completely dark as he processed this information. They seek out danger as entertainment? Yes, sir. And there's more. They have organized competitions, Olympic events, based on activities that our xenobiologists classify as systematic torture. Running until their cardiovascular systems approach failure, lifting objects that exceed their skeletal load-bearing capacity, fighting each other in ritualized combat that would be considered war crimes in 43 different galactic legal codes. The ambassador felt something he had never experienced in his 3-century lifespan. Existential fear. Not fear of physical harm. His crystalline form was virtually indestructible. But fear of what a species this fundamentally alien to galactic understanding might be capable of achieving. Voss, transmit a priority alert to the Galactic Council. Classification: ultra-urgent. Subject: request for emergency session regarding complete revision of threat assessment protocols and biological possibility frameworks. Sir, are we classifying them as hostile? Zephyrian watched the blue world rotate slowly below them, storm systems and volcanic activity dancing across its surface like cosmic weapons while billions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that they were casually surviving conditions that would constitute extinction-level events for most galactic civilizations. No, Voss, I'm not sure what we're classifying them as, but I have the distinct feeling that once the Council encounters this species, we're going to discover that everything we thought we knew about the limits of life in the universe was embarrassingly wrong. The Galactic Council chambers had been designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species across multiple star systems. The vast spherical chamber could adjust its atmosphere, gravity, electromagnetic spectrum, and even temporal flow to keep everyone comfortable. Today, it hummed with unprecedented tension as delegates from 47 systems gathered for what many considered the most significant emergency session in galactic history. High Counselor Thranks of the Valdari Empire called the session to order, his massive form casting shadows across the lower tiers of the assembly. As one of the oldest spacefaring races, having achieved interstellar flight when most current species were still single-celled organisms, the Valdari had earned their position through millennia of careful diplomacy and strategic wisdom. "We are gathered," Thranks announced, his voice resonating through multiple frequency ranges to accommodate the various hearing capabilities present, to address Ambassador Zephyrian's urgent request regarding the species inhabiting Sol 3. The implications of this discovery may fundamentally alter our understanding of life in the galaxy. A murmur ran through the assembly like a wave. Emergency sessions were rare, and rarer still when they concerned a single pre-FTL species. The fact that every major civilization had sent their most senior representatives spoke to the gravity of the situation. Ambassador Zephyrian materialized at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy that was visible across multiple spectrums. "Honorable counselors, what I'm about to present will challenge everything we understand about the relationship between planetary environment, biological evolution, and the fundamental limits of life itself." The chamber's advanced holographic system activated, displaying a three-dimensional model of Earth in perfect detail. Gasps and exclamations in dozens of languages filled the air as the environmental data scrolled past in real time. Storm systems raged with the fury of stellar events. Tectonic plates shifted with planet-cracking force, and radiation levels fluctuated wildly across the spectrum. Counselor Mirith of the Gentle Collective, whose species had evolved on a paradise world of perpetual mild weather and abundant resources, spoke first. Her melodious voice carried undertones of disbelief. "Ambassador, surely these readings are systematic errors. No biological matrix could maintain coherence under such conditions." "That was our initial hypothesis," Zephyrian replied, his form brightening with emphasis. "We recalibrated our quantum sensors 17 times. We deployed multiple probe arrays using different technological approaches. We even sent infiltration biologicals to verify ground truth data. Every measurement confirms. This world is actively hostile to life." Representative Corvin of the warrior clans leaned forward, his armored carapace clicking against the council platform. The warrior clans were considered among the most resilient species in known space, having evolved on a Class 6 world with aggressive fauna and extreme weather patterns. His voice carried the authority of someone who understood survival. "These atmospheric disturbances alone register energy outputs equivalent to tactical nuclear weapons. Our strongest fortifications would be reduced to debris. How does any civilization survive, let alone thrive?" "They don't just survive," Zephyrian said, updating the display to show human settlements across Earth's surface. "They deliberately build in the paths of these disturbances. They have permanent cities directly on geological fault lines, massive population centers in regions prone to atmospheric catastrophes, and thriving settlements in areas with active volcanic systems." The display zoomed in to show human settlements in exquisite detail. Skyscrapers rising from earthquake zones, coastal megacities facing tsunami-generating ocean trenches, entire civilizations nestled in the shadows of mountains that regularly expelled molten rock and toxic gases. "Are they unaware of the dangers?" asked Counselor Yithis of the Hive Networks, whose species had developed perfect environmental prediction systems to avoid their homeworld's seasonal toxic algae blooms. "No," Zephyrian replied, his form dimming with what observers recognized as profound amazement. "They're perfectly aware. They study these phenomena with scientific precision. They predict them, prepare for them, develop elaborate warning systems, and when catastrophes occur." The display shifted to show videos of human emergency response teams working in conditions that would qualify as extinction events for most species. They run toward them. The chamber fell into stunned silence as delegates watched humans rescue each other from floods that could drown continents, earthquakes that could shatter worlds, fires that burned with the intensity of stellar coronas, and atmospheric storms that carried the energy of small wars. There's more, Zephyrian continued, his voice carrying a note that made several species translation systems flag it as existential bewilderment. They don't just survive their planet's attempts to eliminate them. They've weaponized its hostility. New displays showed human agriculture flourishing in conditions that defied biological possibility. Crops growing in soil that would poison most galactic species. Livestock thriving in temperature ranges that span from desert extremes to near-Arctic conditions. Aquaculture in waters so corrosive they could dissolve starship hulls. They've domesticated organisms that our xenobiological databases classify as lethal on contact, Zephyrian explained. They keep apex predators as companions. They consume substances our toxicology reports list as universal poison. They expose themselves to solar radiation in measured doses and claim it improves their biological function. Representative Nexvar of the Silicon Confederation, whose rock-based physiology made them one of the most durable known species, spoke with something approaching reverence. What is their natural lifespan under these impossible conditions? That's where their biology becomes truly incomprehensible, Zephyrian replied. Their organic systems are designed to last approximately 70 to 100 of their solar cycles under constant environmental assault. However, they've developed artificial extensions to both their physical capabilities and lifespan. More significantly, they spend their entire existence deliberately exposing themselves to additional danger. Elaborate, Thranks commanded. The display showed human recreational activities that defied galactic understanding of survival instincts. Mountain climbing expeditions to altitudes where oxygen became too thin to sustain most life. Deep-sea exploration to pressures that would compress solid matter. Extreme sports that frequently resulted in death yet attracted millions of voluntary participants. They climb the most dangerous geological formations on their planet for personal satisfaction. They descend to ocean depths where pressure exceeds our industrial compression limits. They've developed artificial flight methods with significant mortality rates, and yet millions participate voluntarily each cycle. High Counselor Thranks's massive form shifted, sending vibrations through the chamber floor. Ambassador, what is your assessment of their technological development trajectory? Primitive by our current standards, but advancing at unprecedented rates. However, Counselor, their technology isn't the concerning factor. Explain. Zephyrian's form pulsed with an emotion the Council had rarely witnessed from the usually composed Quelari. Genuine fear mixed with profound respect. They've been observing us, Counselor, with instruments that shouldn't be capable of detecting our quantum stealth systems. And when they detected us, they didn't attempt to hide, flee, or prepare defenses. The chamber erupted in alarmed discussion across multiple communication spectrums. They transmitted mathematical sequences directly toward our position. They're actively attempting to establish communication protocols with us. A species from a world that required us to invent new classification systems, beyond Class 9 Nightmare, is attempting to initiate first contact. High Counselor Thranks raised a massive appendage, and the chamber fell silent. What is your recommendation, Ambassador? Zephyrian's form went completely transparent, a sign of profound uncertainty that sent ripples of concern through species familiar with Quelari psychology. Honorable Counselor, I honestly don't know. They represent either the greatest opportunity for expanding galactic civilization we've ever encountered, or the most dangerous species we've ever discovered. Possibly both simultaneously. The council chamber remained silent as hundreds of beings contemplated the implications of a species that considered hell itself a suitable home. We need more comprehensive data, Thranks declared finally. Ambassador Zephyrian, prepare for extended observation protocols. But do not, under any circumstances, initiate direct contact until we understand exactly what we're dealing with. As the session adjourned, none of the delegates noticed that humans had already launched several deep space probes carrying detailed information about Earth and its inhabitants, broadcasting messages of peace toward the nearest star systems. Earth, it seemed, was already reaching out to embrace the galaxy. Captain Maria Santos had been a firefighter for 12 years, and she thought she'd seen everything Los Angeles could throw at her. She was spectacularly wrong. The wildfire consuming the hillsides above Malibu was unlike anything in the emergency response records. Temperatures exceeded 1,200 degrees Celsius in the flame's core, hot enough to melt copper and aluminum. Winds gusted at over 120 kilometers per hour, creating fire tornadoes that could flip armored vehicles. The blaze was jumping across 8-lane highways like they were garden streams, consuming everything in its path with the fury of a miniature star. "Santos, what's your status?" crackled through her radio as she adjusted her breathing apparatus and checked her team one final time. "We're going in," she replied, her voice steady despite facing conditions that would instantly vaporize most galactic species. Behind her, 5 other firefighters prepared to advance into an inferno that registered on their instruments as literally impossible to survive. "Copy that. You have 3 civilians trapped in the Valley residential area. GPS coordinates incoming. Be advised, structural collapse imminent in approximately 15 minutes. Maria looked at the wall of flame ahead of them, a roaring beast of pure destruction that seemed to devour reality itself. Then at her team. "Everybody ready to walk through hell? Again?" joked Tommy Rodriguez, her lieutenant, adjusting equipment that was rated for temperatures far below what they were about to encounter. Must be Tuesday. Unknown to them, their conversation was being monitored by extremely sophisticated listening devices 400 kilometers above their heads, operated by beings whose understanding of courage was about to be fundamentally challenged. Director Voss's scales had been cycling through colors so rapidly that he'd induced a neurological feedback loop. "Sir, are you monitoring the thermal readings from the humans advancing into that combustion zone?" Ambassador Zephyrian was indeed monitoring, and his crystalline form was pulsing with patterns that indicated complete cognitive system overload. "Their protective equipment is rated for less than half those temperatures. The atmospheric toxicity levels alone should incapacitate them within minutes. The radiant heat should cause immediate tissue damage." And yet, on the screens, they watched Maria's team advance methodically through conditions that would qualify as a strategic weapon on most worlds. The humans moved with practiced efficiency despite being surrounded by what was essentially a localized apocalypse, their communication remaining calm and professional even as they walked deeper into hell itself. "Santos to command, we have visual on the target structure. 3 civilians confirmed on the 2nd level. Building's structural integrity is compromised, but we can reach them. Santos, recommend abort and wait for aerial extraction. That building won't last another 10 minutes. There was a pause that lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. Zephyrian timed it precisely. Then, negative command. Aerial extraction estimates 23 minutes minimum. We can get them out in 12. Voss's scales went pale green with something approaching existential terror. "Sir, they're rejecting the statistically safer alternative because the delay would endanger the civilians. Because the humans calculate that the building will collapse before aerial rescue can be implemented. They're voluntarily entering a death trap to save strangers." They watched as Maria's team entered a structure that was literally disintegrating around them, navigating through smoke that would blind most species permanently in temperatures that exceeded the survival thresholds for 78% of known galactic civilization. The building groaned and sparked, metal beams warping from heat that could forge weapons-grade alloys. 11 minutes and 47 seconds later, they emerged with 3 civilians. "All civilians extracted safely," Maria reported, her voice carrying the satisfaction of another impossible task completed. "Building collapsed approximately 30 seconds after our exit. Team status: minor smoke inhalation, no serious injuries." As if this display of casual heroism wasn't remarkable enough, Director Voss had been simultaneously monitoring similar events across the planet, and his scales were now locked in patterns that indicated complete system overflow. "Sir, in the Earth region they call Japan, a team of humans is currently working to contain a radiation leak at one of their power generation facilities. The radiation levels would cause cellular breakdown in most known species within hours, but they're taking calculated shifts to minimize individual exposure while ensuring the safety of millions of their population." "And in their Atlantic Ocean?" A human crew is attempting to rescue members of their species, whose vessel was compromised in a storm system. Wave heights exceed 20 meters, water temperature would induce fatal hypothermia in most galactic species within minutes, and the weather conditions qualify as a Class 7 atmospheric disturbance. They're risking their lives for people they've never met. Ambassador Zephyrian processed this information while watching the rescue operation unfold in real time. The humans worked with mechanical precision despite being tossed around by forces that would disorient most spacefaring species and crush their emergency response capabilities. Sir, Voss continued, his voice carrying undertones of scientific bewilderment, I've been conducting deep analysis of their cultural databases, and I believe I've identified the core psychological mechanism that drives these behaviors. Continue. They have a fundamental concept they call heroism. It appears to be a cultural value system that prioritizes the welfare of others over personal safety, survival, or advancement. This behavior is not just considered acceptable. It's actively celebrated and considered the highest form of personal achievement. They're systematically altruistic toward their own species? Not just their own species, sir. We have extensive records of humans risking their lives to save other Earth organisms. They rescue creatures that cannot provide any benefit to them. Sometimes they rescue creatures that might actually harm them afterward. The display showed humans saving whales from industrial fishing nets, protecting sea turtles from natural predators, risking their lives to help domestic animals escape from natural disasters, even forming organizations dedicated to preserving species that have no economic or practical value. There's more, sir. They have an entire professional class dedicated to this behavior. They call them emergency responders, medical personnel, military service members, and humanitarian workers. Millions of humans voluntarily choose careers that involve regularly risking their lives for others, often for minimal compensation. Zephyrian's form dimmed as he contemplated this revelation. They've institutionalized self-sacrifice as a career path? It extends far beyond professional obligations, sir. They have volunteer organizations, humans who donate their time, resources, and often their safety to help others with no expectation of compensation or recognition. During disasters, humans from completely unaffected areas travel to dangerous zones specifically to assist in rescue and recovery operations. As if to underscore this point, the current displays showed exactly that phenomenon. Humans from around the globe converging on disaster areas, bringing supplies, offering assistance, risking their own safety to help complete strangers they would never meet again. Voss, what is their military structure like? How do they handle organized conflict? That's perhaps the most complex aspect of their psychology, sir. They have multiple military organizations capable of tremendous destruction, but they appear to have developed cultural and legal limitations on their use. They have created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, but they've established treaties preventing their deployment. They developed planet-killing weapons and then voluntarily agreed not to use them? Yes, sir. In fact, many of their nations have complex international agreements specifically limiting the development and deployment of such weapons. They've created oversight organizations that monitor compliance. They police themselves based on abstract principles they call ethics and human rights. Ambassador Zephyrian stared at the blue-green world below for a long time, watching storm systems and geological activity dance across its surface while billions of humans lived their impossible lives, apparently unaware that they were demonstrating psychological capabilities that challenged everything the galaxy understood about intelligent behavior. Voss, I need you to compile a complete psychological and sociological profile of this species. Every aspect of their behavior patterns, their cultural value systems, their decision-making hierarchies, their conflict resolution mechanisms. Sir? For what purpose? Because, Zephyrian said quietly, his voice carrying harmonics that indicated profound philosophical transformation. I'm beginning to suspect that the question isn't whether they're dangerous to galactic civilization. The question is whether galactic civilization is worthy of them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. For the first time in 17 millennia, every member system had sent their highest-ranking representatives. The Sol 3 situation had transcended scientific curiosity and become what many considered the most significant decision point in galactic civilization's existence. High Counselor Threnx's massive form dominated the central platform as he addressed the assembly, his voice carrying undertones that registered as epic-defining moment in 47 different translation matrices. Ambassador Zephyrian's extended observations have raised questions that strike at the fundamental core of our understanding of intelligent life, social evolution, and the very nature of what we call civilization. The holographic displays activated, showing compilation after compilation of human behavior that defied explanation by every psychological model in galactic databases. Acts of heroism that bordered on the impossible, self-sacrifice that seemed to violate basic survival instincts, and altruism that extended beyond species boundaries. Before we proceed, Threnx continued, his words resonating through the chamber's quantum translation field. We must address the fundamental question that will determine the future of galactic relations. Are these beings a threat to the established order of civilized space? Representative Corvin of the warrior clan stood, his battle-scarred carapace reflecting the chamber's lights like ancient armor. High Counselor, the warrior clans have conducted comprehensive military analysis. This species has developed weapons of unprecedented destructive capability relative to their technological development. Their historical records document conflicts of staggering scale and brutality. Their capacity for organized violence appears functionally unlimited. And yet, interrupted Ambassador Zephyrian, his crystalline form brightening with emphasis, they have established legal frameworks limiting warfare. They've created international treaties preventing the use of their most destructive weapons. They provide medical aid to their enemies during active conflicts. They have rules of engagement that prioritize civilian protection even at tactical disadvantage. Medical aid to enemies? Counselor Mirith of the Gentle Collective looked genuinely confused, her species having never encountered such a concept. That seems tactically counterproductive to military objectives. It's based on principles they call humanitarian law, Zephyrian explained. They believe that certain behaviors are fundamentally wrong regardless of military advantage or strategic necessity. They have concepts of war crimes and crimes against humanity that they actively prosecute. Representative Nexvar of the Silicon Confederation shifted his rocky form with grinding sounds that indicated deep contemplation. Ambassador, you've observed them for 6 of their months across multiple crisis scenarios. What is your professional assessment of their actual threat level to galactic civilization? Zephyrian's crystalline form pulsed with patterns that indicated profound uncertainty mixed with growing conviction. Counselor, I believe we're approaching this from the wrong analytical framework entirely. Elaborate, Threnx commanded. The question isn't whether they're a threat to us based on current capabilities. Given their technological limitations, they pose no immediate danger to galactic civilization. The real question is, what happens when a species that has evolved to thrive under Class 11 Deathworld conditions gains access to galactic technology, resources, and knowledge? The chamber fell into contemplative silence as delegates processed the implications across hundreds of different cognitive architectures. Consider this, Zephyrian continued, his voice carrying harmonics that registered as paradigm shift imminent. They exist on a planet where the environment actively attempts to eliminate them every solar cycle. They've developed psychological resilience that allows them not just to survive, but to sacrifice themselves for abstract principles and complete strangers regularly. Their space exploration program operates with failure rates that would be considered criminally negligent by galactic safety standards. Yet they volunteer for missions with significant mortality risk. The display showed human space missions, rockets that occasionally exploded during launch, space stations operating in conditions that would qualify as emergency situations for most species, astronauts who routinely accepted mission profiles with death probability rates that exceeded military combat operations for 70% of galactic civilizations. They're volunteering for missions with documented fatality risks, Zephyrian explained, to advance their species' knowledge and exploration capabilities. Representative Yex-11 of the Machine Collective, whose species had eliminated all risk factors from their culture through perfect technological prediction, spoke through synthesized harmonics, Query: what psychological mechanisms permit rational beings to accept such statistically unfavorable risk parameters? That's precisely what I've been studying, Zephyrian replied. They operate on cultural value systems that prioritize abstract concepts over personal safety and survival. They have principles they call duty, honor, service, and sacrifice. But the phenomenon extends far beyond individual psychology. The display shifted to show human families saying goodbye to emergency responders, military personnel, medical workers, and volunteers heading into dangerous situations. What struck the galactic observers was not the sadness, but the pride, families sending their loved ones into danger because they understood the importance of the mission. They have social support systems that actively reinforce these behaviors. Their cultural mythology, entertainment, and educational systems celebrate individuals who risk everything for others. They teach their offspring that the highest form of existence is service to others, even at personal cost. High Counselor Thranks leaned forward, his massive form creating seismic vibrations in the chamber floor. Ambassador, what specific course of action are you recommending? Zephyrian's form went completely transparent for 4.7 seconds, a display of vulnerability that sent ripples of concern through species familiar with Quellari psychology. High Counselor, I recommend we implement a comprehensive behavioral assessment protocol. What kind of assessment? We make contact, but not according to any first contact procedure we've ever attempted in galactic history. Murmurs of concern and excitement rippled through the assembly in frequencies spanning the electromagnetic spectrum. Explain your proposal, Thranks demanded. Every first contact protocol in our databases assumes we're dealing with rational species that will prioritize their own survival, advancement, and resource acquisition. But humans have demonstrated repeatedly that they'll sacrifice their own interests for abstract moral principles and the welfare of others. So we test whether their altruistic behavior patterns extend beyond their own species and planetary concerns. We present them with a scenario where they could gain significant technological and strategic advantage by pursuing self-interested policies that would disadvantage or harm other galactic civilizations, or they could sacrifice those advantages to help complete strangers they've never encountered and may never meet. The chamber erupted in debate across multiple communication channels and dimensional frequencies. Dozens of species arguing in hundreds of languages about the wisdom, ethics, and implications of testing an unknown species. Representative Corvin's voice boomed over the chaos with harmonic frequencies that demanded attention. Ambassador, if they fail your assessment, what then? We'll have revealed our existence to a potentially hostile Deathworld species with demonstrated capacity for violence. And if they pass, added Counselor Mirith, her melodious voice carrying undertones of genuine concern. What then? Do we welcome beings who consider hellworlds suitable for habitation into our peaceful galactic community? Zephyrian's form brightened to full intensity, casting prismatic light patterns across the chamber that registered as absolute conviction in most species' visual interpretation systems. Counselors, consider this possibility. What if galactic civilization has been fundamentally limiting itself? What if we've become so focused on avoiding risk, minimizing danger, and ensuring comfortable survival that we've forgotten what it means to truly achieve greatness? Meaning, these humans don't just survive impossible conditions, they transform impossibility into opportunity. They don't just accept risk, they seek it out specifically for the chance to help others. They've turned self-sacrifice into the highest cultural virtue. What could galactic civilization accomplish with members who consider dying for strangers the ultimate form of honor? The debate continued for hours, with philosophical arguments spanning concepts that some species had never considered and others had abandoned as impractical idealism. High Counselor Thranks eventually called for order, his massive appendages creating silence through pure gravitational presence. The Council has reached consensus. Ambassador Zephyrian, you are authorized to conduct your behavioral assessment. But understand this. If humanity fails to meet our ethical standards, we may be forced to implement containment protocols. And if they exceed our expectations? If they pass, Thranks said slowly, his voice carrying harmonics that registered as civilization-altering possibility. we may discover that everything we thought we understood about the nature of intelligence, morality, and the potential of civilized life in the galaxy was merely a preliminary approximation of what's actually possible. As the session adjourned, Ambassador Zephyrian began preparing for first contact with the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever discovered. Dangerous not because they might destroy galactic civilization, but because they might demonstrate what galactic civilization could truly become if it had the courage to risk everything for the right principles. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was having the worst day of her career as director of the Arecibo Observatory until it suddenly became the most significant moment in human history. The signal had appeared at 1427 Greenwich Mean Time, a mathematical progression so complex and elegant that it could only be artificial intelligence, broadcasting on multiple frequencies from a point just beyond Earth's gravitational influence. Within minutes, every radio telescope on the planet was tracking it, and world leaders were being awakened for emergency consultations that would determine humanity's future. Dr. Walsh, her assistant, called from across the control room, his voice trembling with excitement and terror in equal measure. The signal's not just transmitting, it's responding to our communications in real time. Jennifer rushed to the main console, her coffee forgotten as she witnessed history unfolding. For the past hour, observatories worldwide had been transmitting basic mathematical concepts toward the signal source. Now, impossibly, it was transmitting back, not just acknowledging their messages, but solving increasingly complex problems they hadn't even posed yet. "Ma'am," the assistant continued, his hands shaking as he operated equipment designed for far simpler tasks. "It just solved Fermat's last theorem, provided proof for the Riemann hypothesis, and transmitted what appears to be a unified field theory, all in the span of 10 minutes. Before Jennifer could fully process the implications, every screen in the facility flickered simultaneously. Then, clear as day in perfect English, text appeared that would change everything. "Greetings, people of Earth. We wish to communicate. We have been observing your species with great interest." For 100 kilometers above the planet's surface, Ambassador Zephyrian monitored humanity's first direct contact with galactic civilization. His crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy that created interference patterns in the ship's quantum processors as he observed the human response to their revelation. "Sir," Director Voss reported, his scales cycling through anxious colors that painted rainbow patterns across the observation deck. "We're detecting elevated stress indicators from human settlements worldwide, but remarkably, no signs of social collapse or mass panic." "Their governmental responses?" "Emergency sessions across all major political entities, certainly, but their global communication networks show curiosity and excitement alongside concern. They're actually debating how to respond most effectively, not whether to hide or prepare for invasion." The first official human reply came within precisely 1 hour and 17 minutes. "Greetings to you as well. We are deeply honored by your contact. We are eager to learn and to establish peaceful relations. We welcome this opportunity for communication." Zephyrian had expected fear, confusion, demands for proof, or demonstrations of power. Instead, humanity had responded with curiosity, gratitude, and an eagerness to communicate that was perfectly consistent with a species that treated the unknown as an opportunity rather than a threat. Over the following 3 days, a remarkable dialogue developed. The humans asked questions about galactic civilization, scientific principles, philosophical concepts, and cultural practices with an intellectual hunger that impressed even the most cynical galactic observers. But Zephyrian was preparing to pose the question that would determine humanity's fate and possibly reshape galactic civilization itself. The test scenario had been carefully crafted by the Council's best xenopsychologists. Zephyrian would reveal the existence of a fictional alien species, the Kenobi, who were supposedly facing extinction from a natural cosmic disaster. The critical element, helping the Kenobi, would require sharing Earth's exact location and detailed information about human capabilities with galactic authorities, potentially making Earth vulnerable to exploitation, invasion, or resource extraction. The message was transmitted simultaneously to every major government, scientific institution, and communication network on Earth. "People of Earth, we must share with you a crisis that affects our galactic community. The Kenobi species, inhabitants of a distant world in the Vega system, face complete extinction from a cosmic event beyond their technological ability to prevent. Their salvation requires specific resources and knowledge that exist within your solar system and scientific understanding. However, providing this assistance would require revealing your world's precise location and detailed information about your species' capabilities to galactic authorities. This information could potentially be used against your interests in future interactions. The decision is entirely yours. We will respect whatever choice you make. Zephyrian expected the response to take weeks as human governments debated security implications, conducted risk assessments, and argued over planetary safety protocols. Instead, replies began arriving within hours, and their consistency was staggering. The first response came from the International Space Station, transmitted by Commander Alexander Petrov. This is the ISS speaking for humanity in space. If there are people out there who need help, then we help them. That's who we are as a species. Send US the information immediately. Similar messages followed from research stations in Antarctica, deep-sea exploration vessels, mountain observatories, and scientific institutions around the globe. The message was remarkably consistent. If someone needed help, humanity would provide it, regardless of personal risk or security concerns. But the response that truly shocked the galactic observers came from Dr. Jennifer Walsh herself, speaking on behalf of the global scientific community. To our new friends among the stars, humanity has always been strongest when we reach beyond ourselves to help others, even strangers. If there is an entire species facing extinction, then their need is infinitely greater than our security concerns. We offer not just the resources you require, but our complete cooperation, our scientific knowledge, and our commitment to do whatever is necessary. If sharing our location makes US vulnerable to future threats, then so be it. Some things are more important than safety. Please, tell US immediately how we can help save the Kenobi. Within 72 hours of the test scenario being presented, every major nation on Earth had officially voted to provide whatever assistance was needed to save the fictional Kenobi species. Not a single government had voted to prioritize Earth's security over helping complete strangers they had never met and might never encounter. More remarkably, human civilians had begun organizing volunteer missions, fundraising campaigns, and resource-gathering operations. Scientists worldwide were collaborating on emergency research projects to develop the technologies supposedly needed for the rescue mission. Director Voss stared at the compilation of responses, his scales locked in a shade of blue that indicated complete cognitive system overload. Sir, they're willing to risk their entire species' security to help fictional aliens. This level of immediate, universal altruism toward complete strangers is unprecedented in our records of intelligent species. No, Voss, Zephyrian replied, his crystalline form brightening to full intensity as understanding flooded his consciousness. This level of altruism isn't unprecedented. It's human. The test had been passed so completely that it redefined success. Zephyrian realized that the galaxy was about to encounter something more dangerous than any weapon or technology. A species that made decisions based on moral principles rather than strategic advantage, that prioritized helping others over protecting themselves, and that treated the welfare of strangers as more important than their own survival. Voss opened a priority channel to the Galactic Council. Classification: civilization-altering discovery. Sir, tell them we need to prepare for the most dangerous thing the galaxy has ever encountered. A species that considers self-sacrifice for strangers the highest form of honor, and actually means it. As Zephyrian began composing his final report on humanity, he realized that the galaxy's fundamental understanding of intelligence, morality, and the nature of civilized life was about to change forever. Humans weren't just from a Class 11 Deathworld. They were a species that turned impossible moral ideals into everyday reality. And they were about to teach the galaxy what true civilization looked like. 6 months after first contact, the Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed anything like the extraordinary session unfolding before them. The emergency assembly had been called not to debate whether humanity should be admitted to galactic civilization, but to address the fundamental changes their arrival had already caused across 47 star systems. High Counselor Threnx's massive form dominated the central platform, but for the first time in his 3-century tenure, His usual composed authority carried undertones of profound amazement. Fellow counselors, we gather today to address what can only be described as the most significant paradigm shift in galactic history. The species from Sol 3 has not merely passed our assessment. They have fundamentally challenged every assumption we held about the nature of intelligent life. The chamber's holographic displays activated, showing not just Earth, but dozens of other worlds across the galaxy. What they revealed left many delegates speechless. In the 6 months since humanity learned of our existence, Thranks continued, they have initiated what they call Project Galactic Outreach, a voluntary program where humans have requested assignment to the most dangerous and challenging missions across galactic space. Ambassador Zephyrian materialized at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form now permanently brightened with what observers had learned to recognize as profound admiration. Counselors, I present the first comprehensive report on human integration into galactic society. The displays showed human volunteers working alongside alien species in environments that had previously required the galaxy's most specialized and expensive technologies. Humans operating in vacuum conditions that would kill most species, working in radiation fields that required protective equipment costing millions of credits, thriving in gravitational extremes that demanded constant medical monitoring for other beings. The Zeltron mining crisis in the Vega system, Zephyrian reported, required evacuation of all galactic personnel due to toxic atmospheric conditions. Humans volunteered to complete the rescue operations. All 847 Zeltron civilians were successfully evacuated. Human casualties, 0. Counselor Mirith of the Gentle Collective leaned forward, her melodious voice carrying notes of wonder. How is that possible? Our atmospheric analysis indicated lethal toxicity levels. The humans modified their primitive atmospheric recycling systems and completed the mission in conditions that would have required our most advanced environmental suits. They treated it as routine. Representative Nexvar of the Silicon Confederation shifted his rocky form with grinding sounds that indicated deep consideration. What about the Kepler station incident? When the research station's life support systems failed, Zephyrian continued, leaving 312 researchers from 14 different species stranded in deteriorating conditions. Humans volunteered for the repair mission. The station was located in a debris field with radiation levels that exceeded our safety protocols by 400%. The humans completed repairs in 11 hours and refused any compensation beyond covering their equipment costs. The chamber filled with murmurs of amazement across multiple communication spectrums. There's more, Zephyrian announced. The humans have established what they call disaster response teams, volunteer organizations specifically designed to assist with galactic emergencies. They've created training programs to help other species develop similar capabilities. They're teaching us. Director Voss materialized beside Zephyrian, his scales now permanently locked in a shade of blue that indicated cognitive transformation. Counselors, we need to address the psychological impact on our own civilizations. Species across the galaxy are requesting to establish human-style volunteer programs. Young beings from dozens of worlds are asking why their civilizations don't have heroes like humanity. Representative Corvin of the warrior clans stood, his battle-scarred carapace reflecting the chamber's lights. The warrior clans have traditionally prided ourselves on courage and strength. But we've learned that humans distinguish between brave and heroic. Brave is facing danger for your own survival or advancement. Heroic is facing danger for complete strangers with no personal benefit. What are you saying? Thranks asked. We're saying that humanity has introduced concepts that didn't exist in our military vocabulary. They have warriors who refuse to harm civilians even when it would provide tactical advantage. They have soldiers who risk their lives to provide medical aid to enemy combatants. They've shown us that the highest form of strength is choosing not to use it. Counselor Yithis of the Hive Network spoke through their collective consciousness. The Hive has analyzed human social structures extensively. Their civilization operates on principles we believed were impossible to maintain at scale. Voluntary self-sacrifice for abstract moral principles, resource sharing without guaranteed reciprocal benefit, and systematic prioritization of collective welfare over individual advantage. Ambassador Zephyrian's form pulsed with patterns that registered as civilization-defining revelation across multiple sensory spectrums. Counselors, the humans have forced us to create entirely new classification systems, not just for their homeworld, but for their species itself. Explain. We can no longer classify planets simply by environmental hostility. Earth has taught us that the relationship between environment and life is far more complex than we understood. We've had to create new categories. Class XII, Adaptive Excellence Worlds. Planets that don't just challenge life, but forge it into something extraordinary. The display showed a new classification system that had evolved from human observations, worlds classified not just by danger level, but by the type of life they produced. More significantly, Zephyrian continued, we've had to create entirely new species classifications. Humans are our first category alpha, transcendent species, beings who have evolved beyond basic survival optimization to achieve systematic moral transcendence. High Counselor Threnx's massive form shifted, creating seismic vibrations that resonated with significance. What are the implications for galactic civilization? Profound and permanent, Zephyrian replied. 17 species have already modified their educational systems to include human-style ethical frameworks. 23 civilizations have established volunteer emergency response programs modeled on human organizations. The Galactic Emergency Response Protocol has been completely rewritten based on human operational methods. And the humans themselves? They continue to volunteer for the most dangerous missions across galactic space. They've established training academies to help other species develop similar capabilities. They're sharing their techniques, their equipment designs, their operational philosophies, everything that makes them extraordinary, with anyone who wants to learn. Director Voss added, they refuse special status, enhanced compensation, or recognition for their contributions. When asked why they risk their lives for strangers, their most common response translates to, because it's the right thing to do. The chamber fell into profound silence as hundreds of beings contemplated the implications of a species that had turned moral excellence into standard operating procedure. High Counselor Threnx's voice resonated with harmonics that registered as epic conclusion in 47 different translation matrices. The Council hereby officially recognizes humanity as the galaxy's first transcendent species and welcomes them as full members of galactic civilization. He paused, his massive form radiating what could only be described as gratitude mixed with humility. Furthermore, this council acknowledges that humanity has not joined our civilization, they have elevated it. The galaxy is no longer the same place it was before we encountered beings who consider self-sacrifice for strangers the highest form of achievement. As the session concluded, Ambassador Zephyrian realized that the galaxy had not just gained new members. It had discovered what it could become when intelligence evolved beyond survival and achieved something that transcended mere existence: the systematic transformation of moral ideals into everyday reality. The galaxy had been waiting for humanity without realizing it. Now that they had arrived, nothing would ever be the same. And that, Zephyrian reflected as he watched human volunteers preparing for their next impossible mission, was exactly as it should be.